Just ahead on American Black Journal, remembering the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela. We'll talk with a member of the committee that arranged Mandela's visit to Detroit in 1990. Plus, we'll hear about an organization that's inspiring girls and women to enter the field of technology. That's all coming up next, so stay with us.
Eric wants to know,
what does DTE Energy do to make Michigan a better place?
Rodney can tell you.
We do a lot, like youth education and employment programs. We fund over 500 jobs for youth all across the state. Many are neighborhood improvement projects just like this.
It's incredible.
Wow, that is fantastic. So this is like a paint by number, this whole thing, right? Communities are such great places, aren't they?
They sure are.
I love the siding. Measure once, cut twice, right? DTE Energy. Know your own power.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. The world lost a major figure in black history when Nelson Mandela died in December at the age of 95. The former South African president was a symbol of the struggle against racial oppression. When Mandela was released from prison in 1990, after serving 27 years, he visited several U.S. cities, including Detroit, where he received a hero's welcome.
Do I even begin to thank you, the wonderful people of Detroit and the Midwest, and through you, the lovely people of this country who have received us with such warmth and affection. Right now, I wish I could climb down the stage and join you in the stands and embrace you one and all.
It was a really special day in Detroit. Here to talk more about Nelson Mandela is Stephen Singleton, a member of the executive committee that brought Mandela to Detroit back in 1990. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you very much.
Boy, it's something to sit and watch that that video and think that's 24 years ago now that happened. But that was such a big deal in Detroit. I remember I was a sophomore in college at the University of Michigan, and we came down to go to the events, and it was a special day.
It was an emotional day.
Yeah.
It was a very spiritually rich day. I can remember when we were anticipate his arrival at the hangar at the Detroit Metropolitan Airport. And we were on pins and needles trying to wait, when is that flight is going to come in? When is that plane going to come in? And when it arrived, everybody yelled and screamed. It
right.
It was
like the Beatles
emotion.
were coming or something. I mean, it was
exactly.
that kind of just sort of feverish response from people here to him.
Truly it was, and he felt that too. When he came in, he felt the warmthness, and he felt the anticipation that we were waiting for his arrival, and he had all smiles after that.
Yeah. You know, as I said in the open, he went to several U.S. cities after he got out of prison. I always felt, though, like his visit to Detroit was special and different from those other cities. And in his speech that night, he talked a little about what he felt were the commonalities between the struggles, not just between South Africa and the United States, but about Detroit specifically.
Certainly he did. And we had our great mayor, Coleman A. Young, that wanted this to be the special arrival for him. Coleman worked hard. He worked, actually, we got together every Saturday at his mansion, and we talked about what are the things that we can do to make this special for him and special for the city of Detroit.
Right.
Detroit was on a downspin, and our mayor was literally holding Detroit up. And people wanted to bash Detroit.
Sure.
And he was not going to let that happen. And so our great mayor was determined to raise as much funds as he could for Mandela.
Right. So talk to me about the process of getting him to come here. Whose idea was it, and then how did you have to figure out how to convince him that, yeah, you should come here and we can make this work?
Well, of course, it all started from our great mayor,
From Coleman Young, sure.
Yes, and he was determined to, once he was freed, he wanted to try to do something special. And one of the things that he knew he could do special was raise funds for his cause. And so he brought together a group of ministers as well as political leaders and said, what can we do? Once the brainstorm started working, and that was maybe 6 months before that, everything started coming together. My piece in that was doing the media. And I offered to really design a board that would go around the city. And through that design of the board, it was very, very special to alert people of the city that we are going to have Mandela come visit us.
Right.
And I thought that was really, really special. And I thought that the mayor was determined to make it special and allow as many people to come to Tiger Stadium as possible.
Right. Well, and that was the sort of thing, is that we had that event in Tiger Stadium, which at that time was you know, where the Tigers played. Obviously, I mean, it went empty after that at some point. But I mean, that made it also just a very Detroit kind of thing, didn't it?
It really did. But before that, we got to Tiger Stadium. I want to talk about the emotional part. When we went to Cobo Conference Center, he met with the media, he met with the executive committee, and it was a wonderful time because he was able to share some of the emotions that he had when he was released.
Right.
And I don't think he shared that to Tiger Stadium, but he did share that with us, and that was a very special time. You know, I knew the Spirit of the Lord was with us right then and there when he was sharing all the emotional feelings and thoughts and determination that he was going to free his country.
Right, right.
And it was sort of like Coleman Young, because he was going to free the people in Detroit that had been oppressed and had been butchered on in terms of some of the media outlets and some of the other political leaders.
Right. I want to sort of try to take viewers back to that time in Detroit, which was very different from the time we have now. There were a lot more people here then, yes. but as you pointed out, we were in tough shape. I mean, the city was at a real turning point, and I think there were a lot of questions in people's minds about what it would be in the future and what particularly our economic future was going to look like. Talk a little about that context for this speech from somebody who was imprisoned unjustly for 27 years to come here and give that kind of speech to Detroiters.
Well, I know that one thing that Coleman wanted for us to understand the determination of Mandela, and he wanted that same determination for the community of Detroit.
For Detroiters, right.
Yes, and one of the ways to do that, it was to bring a special leader to help lead us on through our trials and tribulations that we were having during that time frame in Detroit.
Right.
And I think he did that by bringing him here, allowing him to speak with the masses of people that were at Tiger Stadium, and to speak with a lot of the ministers and political leaders there. I mean, I think that everybody's life sort of changed during that time frame, especially with that meeting that we had at the Cobo Conference Center.
Right. And what are some of the things he said during that meeting that stuck with you?
Well, one of the things that he said is that we can do it. We can do it. We can do this. And he was not only talking about South Africa, but he was talking about Detroit.
That's right.
And the people can rise and make a change. And I think that was inspiring for me. My life has never been the same after that.
Yeah.
It was just the mere fact that he said that in such a powerful way that I knew that I can do something better and greater.
Right.
And I would assist where I could.
Right. When Mandela died in December, of course, there were lots of remembrances of that time he had in Detroit. I'm always struck by the sort of tension between the Mandela, who was the revolutionary in South Africa, who was jailed because of what he was doing and what he was saying, and the sort of different, more sort of forward-thinking visionary who emerged from prison and really changed the country far more after than he was able to before.
Well, truly, because the Spirit of the Lord was with him, and he took that spirit and put it up a notch, and he wanted the people to understand that his freedom was the freedom not only of the South Africans, but the freedom of all the people in this world.
Right, everybody.
Everybody.
Yes.
And
which is a remarkable message, and it's very difficult. I think we struggle sometimes with reconciling, the revolutionary aspect of some people's past with sort of what they do later in life, and it's that they have to sort of come together, that they are one. It is the same person, and they're related. And sometimes I think you can't get to one without having been the other, right?
Oh, that's true. He had what was so special about him. He learned to forgive,
right?
Because he knew that the Lord was going to forgive him. So he learned to forgive and move on, and he carried that with him to his death.
Right. Yeah. And if you look around South Africa today, of course, I mean they still have many problems to overcome. But it's a society that's far more equal now than it was, of course, before.
Without a doubt. I had the very luxury of going to South Africa. I always wanted to minister there. Mm-hmm. As a Catholic lay minister, I ended up doing that and going back to the province area of South Africa and seeing the terrible treatment and the terrible situations that people were living in.
Sure. Still,
yeah. Still, even today. But it tugged on my heart because I knew that at that particular point in time, I was going to make a difference. And the difference I made was to bring out food, medicine, and personal items to allow them to feel normal.
Right. Well, and that is really something you draw from the spirit of someone like Nelson Mandela.
Truly. And then when I did land to that wonderful country, I thought that I'm going to do something very special, and that was to kiss the ground that I knew Nelson Mandela walked on.
Had walked on.
Yes.
Wow.
So I did that with so much love and care and so much appreciation of a man that I learned from. Yeah. For such a distance away.
Right, and who you helped bring to us here in Detroit. Great to have you here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Just ahead on American Black Journal, we'll talk with the founder of an organization that's working to close the gender gap in technology. That's coming up next, right after this look at some important moments in Detroit's Black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African American life in Detroit. This week in 1943, Sugar Ray Robinson won a 10th round decision over Jake LaMotta in their classic bout at Olympia Stadium. In 1942, an angry group of 150 whites picketed the Sojourner Truth homes one day before African Americans were scheduled to move into the new housing project. And in 1952, Coleman A. Young testified before the U.S. House on Un-American Activities Committee, a controversial congressional unit that sought to root out communist sympathizers during the Cold War. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book, On This Day, African American Life in Detroit.
Women make up nearly 47% of the U.S. workforce. However, they represent less than 25% of workers in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math. There's an organization in Detroit that's working to bridge that gender gap and prepare women for successful careers in technology. It's called Sisters Code, and I'm pleased to have the founder, Marlon Page, here today on American Black Journal. Welcome.
Thank you
So this is what I would call one of the sort of hopeful segments that we get to do on this show. Somebody who's working to really sort of change the way African-American girls think about themselves and change the kind of opportunities that they have when they grow up.
Definitely. It's definitely hopeful. You know, my story is one of hope. You know, learning to code when I was 25, having someone believe in me, and just really having that self-belief that I could also do something different.
Right.
Stephen, actually, it just transformed my life. And so this is, to me, is like my reasonable service. How do we stop talking about the technology gender gap and actually effectuate some real change?
Right. So tell me how Sisters Code works to do that.
Okay. Well, Sisters Code was founded, and it was really interesting, September 2013. And I have an opportunity to travel the world speaking with young girls about careers in technology, you know, just the awesomeness of it. But my underlying message is always about believing in yourself enough to know that you can do this. And then I had this aha moment. I'm like, you know, I didn't learn to code until I was 25. And when we talk about this technology gender gap and what the technology scene will look like by 2020,
right.
I said, we're missing a generation of women.
Falling behind,
We're
right.
falling behind, but we're also missing the opportunity to tap into women who are looking to re-career.
Right.
How wonderful is
Right.
it for women who are already working, already have the professional skills, and now they want to try something different, leave what they're doing now, learn a different skill, re-career into the field of technology. We're actually able to bridge that technology gender gap.
Right, right.
So.
When you say, and we should be clear about what we're talking about here, when you say code, I'm not sure everyone knows what that means. You learned to code when you were 25.
Yes.
What does that mean? When
So
you say
coding, back in the day, when I learned to code, I was a mainframe programmer.
Okay.
So mainframe are languages like JCL, DB2. Can you tell I really love this stuff?
Right.
I know.
That's right. That's okay.
I am a certified geek. However, I tell people coding, for example. I did some code in the banking industry. So you have an ATM machine, right? Now, an ATM machine, you go and put your card in that ATM machine. It's not magic.
Right.
How does it know that it's Stephen Henderson?
There's a lot of lines
There
of
are
code
a lot of
that tell it how to
That is
behave.
what coding is. I am actually telling I'm writing lines of code to tell this thing how to act.
Right.
So that when you put your card in, you put in a PIN number, somebody wrote code, like me, to say, this is Stephen Henderson.
Right.
If you want $100 out of the bank, but you only have $20, I write a line of code that says, no.
Right.
You can't have that.
Right.
So that is what coding is. You know, it's powerful.
And what got you into that at age 25?
Well, at age 25, like most college students, I knew I needed to go to college.
Right.
My parents weren't having it any other way. First generation college student. And I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So at that time, I graduated from Wayne State University. I was an aspiring mortician.
Really?
Yes, working at a local funeral
Aspiring
home.
mortician. I'm not sure I've heard anyone use that phrase
I was
before.
aspiring because I would go, I was learning how to embalm, I would sing at the funerals, pray, whatever you needed me to do. During the day, I was also a substitute teacher with a degree in public relations. I mean, just I didn't know what I wanted to do.
All over the place. Yeah.
Right. Someone told me about a program where I could learn to code in 7 languages in 13 weeks, and I would be able to compete with some of the best. Well, I have a strong sense of belief, and I said, you know, hey, why not? I can do it.
And so how ready is that opportunity for people? I mean, how hard was it for you to access that?
It was tough, you know, and that's the thing. It's one thing to say that there are technology jobs, but people need to see people, that look like them who are doing it.
Sure.
And know that it is an option. And
know where to find
go.
the resource to be able to
Exactly.
learn that.
Exactly.
So where did you find it?
Someone just happened, and this is why I'm so passionate about this. 25 years ago, a friend of mine just happened to tell me about this. Hey, if you have a degree, you can come work at this corporation. And I'm like, okay, you know what? We can no longer use that as an excuse.
Right.
So now I'm just one of the many people who are a mouthpiece to say, this is where you can access this information. Look at me.
Right.
You know, I'm homegirl, city of Detroit, but I did this. I've had an awesome career in technology, and you can too. And even though you're older, it's okay. You
Right.
can learn how to do this.
Right. You know, it also strikes me that you know, we talk about careers in technology, and that's super important, and that's a growing sector of the economy. But it's also that every other job that's not necessarily in a technology sector is becoming more technologically oriented, and you've got to have some tech savvy to do those jobs.
Yes, definitely. And so that's why when we look at this older population, for example, before my mom retired, which was a few years ago, she never needed to use technology at her job. So imagine her angst and the surprise when they said, we're bringing in these systems.
We're bringing in computers, and you're going to have to learn.
Exactly. And you think about, you know, even with people, I remember electronic medical records when it came on the scene. You have people who have been in hospitals forever, or in these health organizations who have never used technology. Now you're saying, throw away all the paper, and we are now going to use technology. That's nice to say, but what I'm here to say is there's still that learning curve. You don't want people to run away from technology, so how do we help to usher people into this? And I tell you, for me, it's not through these, you know, the one-hit wonder classes.
Yeah.
It's not talking about coding as a buzzword. You know, this is all cute nowadays. I'm here to say that this is my life. It transformed my life. You can do it too. But it just takes a different type of unconventional measure to make it happen. Technology is everywhere.
Right, right.
You can't
it is.
hide from it.
Everything.
Everything,
Right? Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. You know, I think about my own kids and how much more technology is part of their lives. I mean, they sit with an iPad and talk to their grandmother in Florida, and they don't think anything of it.
Right.
But I also wonder how much they're picking up about that's code, right? How that works. I'm not sure that they make that connection automatically. I mean, I feel like maybe I've got to make that connection for them, that to make this work, you have to know this skill.
Yeah. When I talk with women or young girls about technology, I'm like, you know, take a Facebook or take Instagram. Someone coded that. Now, they sold it for $1 billion. They aren't smarter than you.
Right.
They're
they just
no
have
better
a skill
than you.
set that you may not
They have
have.
a skill set that you may not have, and they ventured to try something different. So you can do the same thing.
Yeah.
You can create these things as well. Do you want to be the person playing on it, or do you want to create something new?
Right.
And you can.
And that's a real change in sort of attitude that you got to get with kids early, right?
Yeah, you have to believe that you can.
Right. And believe that there's opportunity for you to do that.
And I am living proof. There is opportunity.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So what are some of the goals then that you have for this group?
Well, Sisters Code, actually next week, we're kicking off our crowd campaign, and it is called 2020 Byte. It's kind of cute.
BYT.
BYT,
Yes.
2020. And what we're venturing to do is we are going to help 2,020 women re-career into the field of technology by the end of the year 2020.
Okay.
And we're doing that with a 13-week program that is totally unconventional, radical, over the top of it, has been called crazy. As you can tell, I don't care. I know it is doable. And it is a 13-week program where these women will emerge as front-end developers with jobs.
With jobs.
Because
and that's the
what's
key,
important.
right?
To train people and then send them on their merry way does not matter. It won't bridge the technology gender gap. This is about workforce development and helping them to find jobs. The cool part about this is that the women will be paid a salary
while they're in the
class.
That's so key, because how can
Take
you
away
afford
the
to do it for
barriers.
free, right?
Take away the barriers. Take away, I have my bills to pay. Child care.
I can't get child care. That's a huge one.
Right. And we are kicking off a crowdfund campaign. We're hoping that we'll have some more corporate sponsors, but it's not going to stop us from making it happen. It's going to happen, and we're going to start in Detroit.
Yeah, right. And Detroit is where, opportunity is the one thing that I feel like we just don't ever have enough of.
We don't. I figure the first 500 women to go through this program will be Detroit-based, Detroit-based women.
And 13 weeks. Tell me about that. Seems like not a very long time to become proficient.
It's not, and this is what I love about it. When people challenge me, I'm like, you can't really challenge a success story.
Right.
I went through
right?
Yeah. So yeah, you can't challenge. No. I went through it in 13 weeks, and in 13 weeks after that class, I was in the automotive industry, maintaining some software, maybe not developing right away,
right.
but the company I work for was able to bill me out to different companies.
Right.
And years later, I am owning a technology staffing company. I became deputy CIO for the city of Detroit. It was awesome. I wasn't there long, but I was there to coordinate technology behind Super Bowl 40.
Right.
I now travel the world for Microsoft DigiGirls program, telling girls about STEM. Been invited to South by Southwest in a couple weeks to represent Detroit, to talk about Sisters Code. 13 weeks.
13 weeks got you to that.
Got me to that.
Yeah.
It is doable. You have to have the right curriculum. You have to have someone who's passionate about it, which I am, and anyone who works with me has to be. But it's doable.
But it's possible. That's
Of
excellent.
course it's possible.
Well, we'll have to have you back in a year and see how many,
Thank
how
you.
far are we to that 220,000 goal.
Yep, 2020,
Absolutely.
by 2020.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we say goodbye, all of us here at American Black Journal want to extend our deepest sympathy to the family of the late Angelo Henderson. Angelo was the first and only African-American reporter to win the Pulitzer Prize at the Wall Street Journal. His voice was heard recently here on Detroit Public Television as the narrator of a documentary about the Detroit Institute of Arts. In addition to being a minister and radio host, Angelo was a tireless community activist. We thank him for his passion and his commitment to the city of Detroit. That's our program for today. We'll be back on March 23rd with a new episode of American Black Journal. In the meantime, you can check out past episodes on demand at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time.
Eric wants to know.
What does DTE Energy do to make Michigan a better place?
Rodney can tell you.
We do a lot, like youth education and employment programs. We fund over 500 jobs for youth all across the state. Many are neighborhood improvement projects just like this.
It's incredible.
Wow, that is fantastic. So this is like a paint by number, this whole thing, right? Communities are such great places, aren't they?
They sure are.
I love the siding. Measure once, cut twice, right? DTE Energy. Know your own power.